into authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us, from personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation.
Ventura's cross-examination to wrap up before lunch today. Prosecutors have said that Ventura, who's nearly 9 months pregnant, could soon go into labor.
Over the last hour, the defense has been asking Ventura more about her 2018 rape allegation against Combs, Ventura's drug use, her mental health problems, and a 2014 threat that she made to a man who claimed he had seen a sexually explicit tape of her, also raised in court. The defense at one point asking Ventura, quote, "Do you still have love for him?" referring to Combs. And Ventura answered by saying, quote, "I have love for the past and what it was." Let's bring in court TV anchor and former prosecutor Julie Grant right now. Okay, Julie, what do you think of what you have been reading about what the defense has brought up today?
Brianna and Boris, good afternoon to you both. The defense is right when they say that Cassie Ventura is the most critical witness to this case. The defense is doing its job because what they're trying to do is bring out that she's not a perfect person, that they're saying she might have wanted to engage in these freak-offs on more than one occasion, that she was willingly staying in this relationship with Sean Combs, even though she knew that it was an abusive one. They're bringing out things that she said to other people that are less than flattering. All that being said, the government doesn't need to have a perfect victim. What the government has done this week essentially is establishing the sex trafficking crimes that they've charged Sean Combs with. And I would argue that they are well on their way to proving these crimes. A lot of people don't realize that with sex trafficking, you don't have to have movement anywhere. You don't have to go across state lines. A lot of times people confuse it with human smuggling. Here, somebody can be trafficked in their own home. All you really need is someone providing somebody else for that commercial sex act. And when I say commercial, I mean anything of value, not even necessarily money, to be given by force or coercion. And so Cassie Ventura has done her job this week for the government, and now the defense is doing its job to try to make it seem as if she wanted to be in this relationship and that what happened in those freak-offs was not coerced.
Julie, the government, or rather the defense, asking her about mental health treatment that she received, this therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. Would they go with that line of questioning? How does that benefit their defense of Combs?
Great question, Boris, because it could go to her credibility and her memory's reliability. And so here they're trying to paint her out as somebody who may not be remembering all the details as they actually occurred. Maybe somebody whose memory isn't all that great. They want the jury to think, well, maybe she's somewhat of a basket case after all of this, and maybe what she's telling us we can't rely on because maybe it's not exactly true. So by them wanting to go through the therapy she's been through, there was a mention of EMDR that deals with eye movements and recalling memories. They're going through all of that to try to make it seem as if, okay, maybe Cassie Ventura isn't emotionally stable. Maybe her mental recollection isn't quite right. And then we can argue later to the jury in closing arguments that they can't rely on that. So that's exactly what the defense is trying to get at with those lines of questioning, Boris.
I wonder what you think, and also how the prosecution is going to have to respond to that. We should be clear, this particular type of therapy is considered a leading therapy for veterans processing PTSD. I remember talking to a Virginia Tech survivor survivor. School shooting survivors use this very successfully. And Cassie Ventura testified it helps recount memories and process them. She said that if there was a time when you were getting beat up in a room and couldn't walk out, you would reimagine it in a way that you were actually able to leave the room. Do you see this potentially backfiring on the defense?
Oh, Brianna, you took the words right out of my mouth. Yes, you are exactly right. The defense needs to be really careful what they're doing here, because she is a victim. She has put herself out there as saying that she survived these horrific instances of rape, of other assaultive behaviors, some of which we've seen evidence of on that videotape that CNN exclusively obtained and then broadcast, and thank goodness for that. And so with the defense trying to go down this road, trying to attack her therapy, the government's going to get right back up there and say, well, the only reason she needed to go to therapy and seek EMDR and the other types of therapy was because of the actions of your client, Combs' attorney team. So they're going to go right back at it and say that had she not been so brutally traumatized, she wouldn't have had to seek therapy, and that's a good thing. And certainly anybody on that jury who's ever been to therapy or knows anything about it, they're going to be thinking about how Cassie Ventura could be being traumatized right now, again, in having to relive all of the various questioning for days from both sides. So you're right, Brianna. This is a slippery slope that the defense team is on right now with her.
Julie Grant, great to have you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Let's bring in attorney Renato Stabile to talk about this further. Renato, thanks for being with us. I wonder what you make of how the cross-examination went for the defense.
Look, I think it went about as well as it could have gone. They did what they needed to do in terms of confronting her with her text messages that undermine her claim that she was being coerced. But remember, the prosecution is going to clean a lot of that up right now on their redirect. They're going to go back over some of those text messages. They're not going to go through all of it. Remember, they said they're only going to spend about an hour, and everybody wants her to get off the stand by the end of today. But they're going to give her an opportunity now to explain why it is that at the same time that she's having these text exchanges that, you know, some are loving, and some of the things she did in terms of setting up these encounters, she was nevertheless being coerced.
How hard is that for a jury to be convinced of, the idea that because there are some times where she may seem like a willing participant, and then there are times where she has clearly said that she doesn't want to do it. How does a jury receive that sort of changing over time?
Look, I think the problem here really for the jury and for the defense is that, you know, regardless, now look, the defense is going to say she wasn't coerced, but there's still been a lot of really ugly testimony. I mean, testimony about beatings and abuse and threats and all kinds of crazy things. And, you know, you would have to believe that the jury can separate those horrific things out and accept that despite all of that, he technically is not a sex trafficker, which is what he's on trial for. That is extremely difficult for the jury, for any human being to do. So I think that's really the problem here for P. Diddy is, you know, jurors being able to separate those two things, even though legally, technically, the defense, you know, is going to try and make the point that it doesn't satisfy the elements of sex trafficking, but extremely tough.
Yeah, I mean, given some of the lurid details, you wonder how the jury is going to receive.
Ventura has testified for more than 18 hours. Okay. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Receive that sort of information. I do want to get your thoughts on how you think the prosecution is going to approach redirect. They're saying that it's going to last about an hour. What do you think will come of it?
Yeah, look, it's going to be very quick. They're only going to hit the high points where they think, you know, the defense maybe scored some points. I think she's done quite a lot of damage here. It's pretty clear why they called her as their, you know, one of their early witnesses, because the damage that's been inflicted, regardless of whether or not they make out the elements of the charge, but just the overall testimony of what they heard about him just is going to hang over the rest of this trial.
And I wonder, as we're looking ahead here, we're going to ultimately be hearing from one of her former friends. How do you think this is going to go?
Yeah, I think they're going to call one of her former friends to corroborate a lot of what she said. I mean, I think it's corroborated in the videos, it's corroborated in the text messages, but I think the former friend is going to corroborate that she didn't want to do these things, maybe that she confided in her as to her state of mind, that she felt she was being forced into these things. So they'll probably have some contemporaneous evidence of what she was going through while these things were happening, despite what is in the text messages.
All right, Renato, thank you so much for your insight. Renato Stabile, we appreciate it.
Catching up on all things Diddy, y'all. Okay. Catching up on all things Diddy. Ooh-wee. It has been an explosive week. First week out the gate. They have interviewed the security guard for Intercontinental Hotel. They have interviewed escorts, and now Cassie all week. Cassie's been on the stand for like 20 hours. It's been like 20 hours.
Got a question for you, Ben, and from Christina. Do we know if any other victims and how many will be testifying? Also, witnesses to these freak-offs. Can we expect any, and how many?
I think that, and Jesse, you may know the.
So we've already seen that one. Sorry.
Between them over the years that they were dating. And some of them, they started right away with exchanges like this one. Diddy sending her a text, "It makes me so happy that you would fly to ATL just to see me. I'm a very lucky man. I love you. I miss you. Can't wait to hold you." And she replied, "I'm a very lucky woman. I miss you so much. I'd fly wherever you needed me, whenever. I love you."
Now, the centerpiece of a lot of what happened during direct testimony were freak-offs. And what the prosecution tried to show was that he forced and or coerced her into doing these freak-offs. And we've talked about this earlier this week, that at least my opinion is that in a lot of these, the prosecution just didn't close the loop. It was something she felt. Was communicated or not, it doesn't seem like, at least the prosecution didn't get her to say, "I communicated it."
Because the defense will say, if that's just Cassie telling you how she felt and she never actually said those words.
That's correct.
To Diddy, how was he to know that he is forcing her to something?
So they now produced some texts showing that Cassie was actually into freak-offs.
Right. In particular, this is 2009.
Just a year after they started dating.
I'm always ready to freak off. It can be whenever.
So what they're trying to show is, because look, they're looking at a pregnant woman on the stand, and it's hard to juxtapose that with this. But the defense is saying, let's go back in time where this relationship started. And they're saying it was grounded in this and that it's not a crime.
But this was their lifestyle. In fact, Cassie admitted on the stand that they led a swinger's lifestyle.
Yeah, and at some point, what Cassie has said during her direct testimony was that the first freak-off they had made her feel humiliated, made her feel confused. But what was she actually expressing? And this text message does a lot to show what Diddy was receiving, which sounded like enthusiasm, excitement about freak-offs. It'd be hard to say that he felt as though she was being pressured. So that's what they're trying to draw that distinction by looking at her text messages. What were you
So I see those teacups in the chat. Thanks, Michael, for dropping your teacups. Michael says they gotta say they never moved those escorts. I hear that. I mean, this is Diddy. Like, Diddy is a billionaire, right? So he has billionaire resourceful, money at his disposal. Do you think he stayed grounded? I don't believe so. I hear that Diddy was all over the world with these shenanigans. That's why, we're only in the first week. Cassie's the only one speaking. I mean, I would think that the feds would try to bring anybody and everybody that would be relative and credible to try to really put Diddy in prison, but we're yet to see. Okay.
Saying during this time, and it sounded a lot like you were enthusiastic about freak offs.
And she also, I mean, there were some we just cannot read, but it got really graphic.
Still very graphic about things that she wanted done to her, things that he wanted during their encounters that they were, it seems, setting up very frequently.
Charles, I got to say that, we have somebody in the courtroom who's been talking to the other people who were there. I've been looking at transcripts. You've been looking at transcripts. There is a lot that the prosecution brought up about domestic violence, and it is horrific what she went through.
Were revealed and read aloud in court for everyone to see, and things just got serious. Attention, please. Well, if you don't know this, during a hearing, Diddy's alleged text messages were revealed as he appealed his denied request for pretrial release after being arrested on major charges like sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. And in one of these texts, sent after a 2016 hotel altercation, Diddy's reportedly said, "Call me. The cops are here. I've got 6 kids, yo. Please call. I'm surrounded. You're going to leave me all alone." Prosecutors claim this shows Diddy knew the police would get involved, arguing that releasing him could lead to witness intimidation or stop them from coming forward. Meanwhile, Diddy's lawyers maintain his innocence, stating he's undergoing treatment for past issues and admitting his relationships were toxic. But it's clear the court isn't convinced, as things are just getting serious. Even though the internet is divided now on some defending Diddy's innocence.
Click on the plus icon for more details. The Diddy Dailies, Episode 5, Crossfire and Control. In court yesterday, Cassie Ventura, visibly pregnant, endured a grueling cross-examination. Defense attorneys presented intimate text messages to challenge her claims, suggesting a consensual relationship. However, Cassie stood firm, describing years of coercion and control. She recounted a harrowing 2016 incident captured on video where Diddy allegedly assaulted her in a hotel hallway.
It is almost unspeakable. But the domestic violence that was raised, and a lot of it was raised, doesn't all, and most of it does not connect to the crimes for which he's charged. There are state crimes, but this is a federal case with very specific charges.
Now, you tell me, in your experience in covering trials like this, and even as a lawyer, the prosecutors don't have to slam dunk their case with 1 witness, 2 witnesses, or even 3 witnesses. Right?
Absolutely true.
They are painting a picture here, and they're just giving you little pieces of it. And at the end is when they want the jury to say, "Look what we've shown you."
You're 100% right.
So maybe Cassie is just she's not there to close the loop. She is there to paint, to start the tapestry, right?
But
this is just, this is who he is. These are the things that happened. These are the things I went through. And then later, you're going to have people who are testifying about how all of those things were set in motion. Who was planning?
Listen, I agree with everything you just said. But I go back to what happened in the Rodney King case, where there were expectations. And when the jury started seeing him, it was different. And the expectation in this case from the jump, with the U.S. attorney speaking, everybody said Cassie was the beginning and end of this. And I don't know how you feel. I mean, her testimony was compelling, and the stories are horrific.
I think we all felt like she was going to be that witness, because we know that the whole reason that the U.S. Attorney's Office even started their investigation
was because of her lawsuit.
Was because of her lawsuit.
Right.
But maybe they discovered way more once they started looking into this, and those are the counts he's facing.
Like I said, I don't currently hear it, y'all. Let's see what the people are saying. Diddy exposed Cassie's text messages. One of the text messages says, I love our FOs. FOs meaning freak offs when we both want it. I want to freak off right now. Laugh out loud, says Cassie. I want to have fun with you. Diddy says, let me know if you want to have a late night. Jules is available. If you're not into that NP, no problem. We could just do a thing. Love you. She says, love you. He says, if you're not super orny, what the F? She says, orny, of course I am. Okay. People are chiming in, dropping tea in the chat, saying she was very, very freaky, says Kayvon. She had her fun and VIP champagne, equaling she now wants to sue for even more handouts, but she chose to freak off more than most. Story Ski says, of course, he's going to text him what he wants to hear. Of course, he's going to say what he wants to hear. To do, it's all called manipulation. Okay. Tony says, please. Twain says, or the fact she got turned out and turned on. She admitted in interviews before this came out that she would go to many of the freak offs without Diddy. Okay. Sharon Bell says, maybe she was just trying to please him and keep him happy. That's what people do in controlling abusive relationships. Okay. So let's get back into TMZ, updating everything on Diddy, y'all.
And so far, guys, you're right that they have been focusing a lot on her testimony and on her cross-examination about domestic violence, which is not what he's being charged with. But we've learned that just moments ago, Diddy's own defense read out text messages that Diddy sent to Cassie in 2017 of him saying, didn't hear from you, so I just put some plans in motion. Let me know
I
to
came
stop.
across some cross-examination questioning turns to the freak offs. Much of the previous testimony on Tuesday and Wednesday focused on the actual events Combs stage. Now, defense attorney Anna Esteva is questioning Cassie about those same topics, presenting text exchanges to suggest she participated enthusiastically. And if you guys want to actually see these texts, go to my posts on any social media and they'll be there. Okay. So Estevea is loud while Cassie reads her own. Combs, August 2009. When do you want to freak off? Laugh out loud. Cassie, I'm always. Let me make sure y'all can hear me in the chat, y'all. Can y'all hear me in the stream? Okay. 2 days later, Cassie texts him again. Combs, I can't wait to watch you. I want to get real hot. Cassie, me too. I just want it to be uncontrollable. I'm going to post this onto my post board. And there's lots of, music comments underneath this. Zelda says, I don't believe that he was dating her in 2009. Foster says, that's not how the texts that are currently being read now are. She feels uncomfortable and not safe. Is freak off a crime? Everyone was in it freely. Why did she stay so long in a drug and abusive relationship? Sounds like she wanted to be with him for 10 years, said Ophelia Posse. Tara Blackwell says we should not victim blame. David Gonzalez says, I agree, but there has to be a victim, not a participant. Time will tell. Jonathan Tyler says she shouldn't have agreed to it. When will y'all learn? Stop people pleasing. If folks show you they're weird, get away from them. Staying makes you weird. And to blame for everything that happens after that, common sense says it's only going downhill, not up, fool. Just like Tory Lanez, he getting what he got because of him. Stop doing weird stuff, like covering for people who always doing weird stuff. Back to Diddy.
Surprise package coming in from out of state. Just let me know if I'm headed in the wrong direction and I can cancel. So that is the first time that I have heard or seen them mention anything about what he's actually being charged with, which is the Mann Act.
So what is the?
What is the? Depends on what that surprise package.
Yeah, what's the package?
I would assume a escort coming from out of state.
See, that's the thing. We can't make that assumption.
And that's the thing.
And that does come back to what you're saying about closing the loop.
Listen. He has a huge problem with the Mann Act. I mean, because the Mann Act doesn't require force or coercion with Cassie.
It's the transaction.
It's the transaction. I think he has a huge, with all of the charges, because I think there are, listen, we did a mock jury in one of our Tubi, and we did not in any way prime them to go in any direction. We gave them the jury instructions. They saw evidence in the case. They immediately honed in on racketeering, and they started saying, why is this racketeering?
All right, y'all.
As
they're coming in, I'm going to be posting it. Okay, I'm going to be spilling it into the stream, into the show. Angela, you just came back up. She got 2 minutes 38 seconds of audio. Let's listen to it about Cassie taking the stand this morning.
And so she talked about a lot of things today so far. The jury was shown sexually graphic text messages between Diddy and Cassie that were in 2009. She actually had to read some of those aloud, and she asked for a short break also as she was being cross-examined by defense today. She also talked about using opiates around the time that she sent text messages. She would ask him things like if he had any more pills, and she admitted that she was using that at the time that those videos were sent. She also mentioned deleting a video in these text messages, but testified she wasn't sure what kind of video she was referring to in the messages and couldn't be sure if it was a freak-off recording or not. Other things she testified about was the fact that Diddy was the second older man that she dated. She also dated Ryan Leslie prior to that for about 3 years when she was 18 or 19. And then after that, that's when she started dating Diddy. She also, in these text messages, told him that she needed to feel safe and that some of these experiences that they were having, these quote unquote freak offs, she felt a little dirty and grimy as opposed to sexual and spontaneous, and that she needed to feel safe and like home. Other things she talked about was that she and Diddy had conversations about a swingers lifestyle and all of this. So basically, it feels like she's being pretty honest on the stand, though, because there's things that she's saying that I know people are ripping apart, like, why would she say that? Or, oh, we don't believe her. But she's also being really honest, and I think that's important. What do you think, Dan, when you're seeing all this?
It's just got to be so hard to relive this. I can't imagine.
And she's pregnant.
And her husband's there.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yes. She discusses also the influence that Diddy had on how she dressed. She would have to send pictures of her outfits, but she also said that he had good style when questioned about that. Other things she talked about was she felt like he was an addict, as far as an addict addicted to success. That's what she's saying that she felt like. And it felt like she was falling in love. That's in the text messages as well. But they were in a relationship for 11 years. She testified that she loved him and believed that he loved her, and that she fell in love with his, quote, real personality. And so it was those freak-offs, I think, that really got in the way of what it was.
Diddy Dailies. Episode
But
5.
that's who Diddy was, right? Diddy was the person
And they're charging
that,
this one guy. They had a real
engulfed
problem.
you up into his world and made you feel like, this is perfect for what you're looking for. And then he unleashes his true nature, right? Okay.
With that, they did not have a problem with the Mann Act. They found him guilty on the Mann Act, and they hung 6 to 6 on racketeering. The ovulation we should talk about.
Yes, because this is going to be debated by people, by couples around the country as to what she meant here. So Mr. Combs wrote to wrote a text message to Cassie saying, "Do I have your permission to set up freaky fun?" And the defense attorney says to Cassie, "You wrote back to him, ovulation." And Cassie said, "Yes."
We can say so right there. That is not even code. She is saying, I do not want to have intercourse.
I do not want to have that freaky fun. I am ovulating, and that's a no without saying no.
That is a no. I don't even think that's debatable.
But it.
In another context, ovulation is when people are trying to have babies.
Okay.
They say, "I'm ovulating. Come
But
home.
he said
I'm
freaky
ovulating.
fun.
Let's have babies."
Yeah. Although
But
again,
not
look,
here. I
freaky
agree
fun
with
doesn't necessarily mean
it's a freak off. I mean,
in there, from everything we've heard, when he says freaky fun, that's probably freak off. So he says ovulation. But what is interesting is that
this is the turn.
She agreed and said,
More text messages. So Cassie said that she tells Diddy to stop playing the victim and said, "I love our freak offs when we both won it in 2017." Text messages. Cassie said those words didn't actually align with her actual reality in court. Additional messages showed them planning a freak off together, though. She also stated that there were times that Diddy arranged things for the freak offs, supplies, escorts. Diddy's attorneys are planning on showing the jury a lot more texts and emails while they have her up there, y'all. It is so explosively wild.
"Okay, we can set this up."
We should get into what they said about kissing, because that's the key.
She does agree to go forward. And what he said to her in a text message was, "Okay, can we kiss a lot?" And the lawyer asked, "What did you say to that?" And she said, "Yes." So
Cassie
it sounds
said
as though she said no to sex, but agreed to a freak off that was more tame with just lots of kissing.
A modified freak off.
A modified.
And then see, here's the twist again. There are two twists here.
Oh, I got a twist. I got more excerpts from Diddy's text messages to Cassie just days after the violent hotel hallway beating. So, Diddy to Cassie, "I'm so horny for you." Cassie to Diddy, "You are what made you feel that way." Diddy to Cassie, "I felt that way from Friday," referring to Friday, the day the hotel hallway beating, May 6, 2016. Diddy to Cassie, "What you doing?" Cassie to Diddy, "It wasn't a good vibe. We need a different vibe than Friday." Diddy to Cassie, "Fuck Friday," laugh out loud. F Friday, laugh out loud. "I don't even want to do that again." Cassie to Diddy, laugh out loud. True. Diddy to Cassie, "When do you want to freak off?" Cassie to Diddy, "I'm always ready to freak off." I'm posting these excerpts on the page, y'all. Make sure you get over there and read them for yourself.
The twist is she testifies that the freak off lasted 10 hours.
Diddy said to her, "All right, we're going to start at 10 p.m. and no getting out of character until 8 a.m.
So did they just kiss for? The thing is, they never said what happened
getting
in the room.
out of character.
Well, one of the keys to this, though, to your point, Harvey, is if for 12 hours he stayed respectful and just kissed, then it sounds like they had an agreed upon consensual freak off on her terms that she allowed.
Right.
If it turned into sex and she had said ovulation, meaning no at the time, then it sounds more like a forced freak off. So it does depend on what happened.
But we don't know what happened because they never said.
But remember, it's the defense that's raising this, so I'm guessing they know based on.
But then why didn't they ask? Why didn't they say, and what happened during the 12?
Can I just point out that, she said ovulation. We're assuming that means no, but ovulation is a time when you are most likely to get pregnant, but it's also the time when women are most erotically charged.
Horny.
Well,
yes.
But the thing is, what follows up then makes sense, because Diddy says, "What about kissing?" She says, "Okay." So you would think
that she's saying, "All right, I'm fine with."
The other thing, it's a subtlety, but the other thing I think is really important in that text exchange. He says, "Do I have permission?"
Yes, which is exactly why the defense brought it up.
That's right.
He asked your permission.
That's right.
Hey, this is Latrell from Atlanta. You know, the Diddy Cassie trail is definitely monumental, unprecedented, and definitely perplexing. You know, hopefully if these allegations are true, justice gets served. But I can't say that with Cassie's testimony. It might not be enough. They might need more witnesses in order for this to even go any further.
Yeah.
And there will be.
They're going to be, again,
There will be.
Judges said expect us to go 8 weeks at least. So.
Okay, we are going to take a break.
All right. When we come back, Justin Bieber showing off.
Let's pivot. We have been live, y'all, since like 7:30. We're going to go ahead and pivot over now, okay, to where we need to be, which will be watching the United States versus Diddy. Every week, we are going to make sure that we chime in, watch that, and review that, okay? Let's get into it. We have been live all day catching up on Diddy stuff. Like, it's a lot. So let's, keep it moving forward with where we are. We're staying up to date with what Diddy got going on in trial, okay? Hold on, guys. Please continue to stay tuned. I gotta get this live stream. Hold on, guys. Please continue to stay tuned. I gotta get this live stream up and figure out how I'm going to let this play for you guys, okay? So give me a second. I don't know why Tubi worked completely fine last week. Let's see if I can get it to work again, okay?
But I do have ways of getting the audio played on the video, so no worry. Okay. Hold on. Okay.
During sexual freak-offs where escorts and Diddy would urinate on her. All things a very pregnant Cassie told the jury as she broke down in tears. A new, unedited video of the brutal 2016 beating was introduced, and it could create big problems for the defense. But did prosecutors fall short? Did they really connect the brutality to the alleged criminal acts they say Diddy committed? Diddy's team went in hard when they cross-examined Cassie, reading the love note she repeatedly sent to Combs, and even talking about how she was always down for a freak-off. Who were the winners and losers in this make-or-break testimony? We'll break it all down. This is TMZ Presents United States versus Sean Combs inside the Diddy trial. I have to tell you, I have covered trials for decades, and I don't remember a more gripping, compelling witness, and it has nothing to do with what you believe or what you don't believe, but Cassie Ventura's testimony was just something that riveted everybody. And it was packed with information, and in some cases, information that didn't necessarily, I think, make the prosecution's case, but you couldn't help but just be transfixed by what she said on the stand and how she was cross-examined. Three things that are going to be so important here: consent, force, and coercion. I have the best panel. I have the best panel. Nancy Grace is the host of Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. Mark Garagos, in some way, shape, or form, represents Diddy. We don't know exactly whether it's the criminal case or not. Maybe he'll tell us someday. We have Ebony K. Williams, the host of Equal Justice and Holding Court, and Joe Tecopina, a fantastic defense lawyer who most recently won the ASAP Rocky case. So I want to start with just reading something from the testimony. The prosecution spent a lot of time on domestic violence. There is no question there was domestic violence, and horrible domestic violence in this case, that went way beyond the video you've seen in 2016. So I just want to give you a couple of examples, and then I want to raise something, because I think there might be a problem here. The prosecutor: did you get into arguments? Cassie: yes, it would result in violence, dragging. Prosecutor: what else did he do? Cassie says, stomp me in the head if I was down. Prosecutor: how frequently did he get violent? Cassie: too frequently. I would get black eyes and bruises. Now, there's another example. This is Cassie: Sean came to my house, and this is when, by the way, she was dating her now husband, Alex Fine, before they got married and Diddy found out they were dating. She says, Sean came to my house and raped me on my living room floor. Prosecutor: did you ever have sex with him, Diddy, again? And she says, yes, voluntarily. We had a good night. I went back to his house. The prosecutor says, can you explain why you did that after he raped you? Cassie says, we had been together for 10 years. My question, and why don't we start with you, Nancy, is that's a crime, if true, but it's a state crime. And he's being charged with a specific federal crime. And a lot of people in the courtroom who are covering it, myself included here, I think there's the circle isn't complete. They haven't connected a lot of this domestic violence, I would even say most, to the criminal acts for which he's charged.
Okay. Well, remember, the state will have a closing argument to connect all the dots, but very clearly, what is being made out in this case is forcible rape and extortion. Extortion. What is that? Forcing someone to do something by many means. It could be threatening to release the freak-off tape. She was in fear of that. It could be fear of a beating, fear of being thrown out of her apartment or her home, and him keeping the key and her throwing her out on the street without her shoes like she testified to. All of that equals extortion, which is one of the federal charges. And not only that, remember, there's a fallback in this case, having people cross state lines to engage in prostitution. We've already made that out. That is a federal crime. Remember all the male sex workers that Diddy's associates, his Confederacy, would fly in and make the travel arrangements for? That's why they were talking about that, Harvey, to prove the element.
Joe, what do you think?
We got big balls and I cannot lie. Those other shows can't deny. When the
I got to tell you, in fact, let me just bring Brian Andrews in. He's our producer who's in the courtroom. Brian, my understanding is there were other people covering this who were wondering the same thing about all the domestic violence.
Well, it seems that was their main show. They were just hoping to make him look as awful as he possibly could in front of this New York jury. And I'll tell you, watching the jurors and their reactions in the beginning yesterday, they were riveted to what Cassie was saying, and she was stunning. I mean, she walked in and all eyes were on her. You could not help but have your heart broken as she talked about her love for Diddy through the years and that she'd do anything, but that the drugs and the possessive nature of it and just the crazy nature of flying all over the world.
I want to get into the domestic violence because you and I had a discussion about this, that people were wondering about why the focus on that so much, where they were wondering how it connected.
Well, I think people were wondering why they started this way. I mean, they're trying to prove federal cases, but a lot of the people who have been in the courtroom with me are thinking they're just trying to paint Diddy with the ugliest brush they can.
Good grief, what is wrong with you people? Haven't you seen Mission Impossible? How it starts with an incredible scene? That's what we're doing. Gary goes to Tacopina. Ebony, you all know about trying cases. You know it's true. You start with a bam, and that's what they did.
Mark?
So this is what I would call, and Nancy and I've had this, what would you call it, Nancy? Spirited discussion for many years. She calls this.
You ran away with your tail between your legs mostly, but okay, spirited discussion.
She tells this as, oh my goodness, this is just starting off with a bang. I call this the character assassination block, whether it's this case or any other case.
They didn't do that. He did that to himself. Oh, was that the prosecutor, Emily Johnson, running down the hotel hallways wearing nothing but a towel?
The prosecutors come out and they just assemble all of the worst things that they can do because obviously it's easier to demonize a defendant. It's easier to make the jury hate the defendant. I mean, part of what trying a case is you want a juror to want to help your client. So prosecutors know that. So what do? They call them the defendant. They bring out the worst possible looks for them. They start off with the worst day that any defendant's ever had. That is what prosecutors
the worst possible looks.
Mark, come on. You mean they're doing
that
their
wasn't
job?
prosecutor Emily Johnson running down the hall in a towel. That was Diddy. He did that to himself.
There's a reason why you're not supposed to have bad character evidence. There's a reason why judges make decisions as to whether it's more prejudicial than probative. That's the legal standard. And the reason they do that is you're not supposed to convict or prosecute by proxy. You're supposed to, as Harvey kind of set it up. Exactly. I get it, Nancy, but the whole idea is there's a case.
They're crimes. That's Tacopina.
Well,
Come on.
They're
You're
crimes.
a veteran defense lawyer, but you know Garagos is totally lying right now.
Okay. I want to move on to something else because Nancy, you talked about this right off the top about extortion, that he was threatening to release these tapes. I want to see what you guys think of this because I don't see this loop being closed here. So the big one they talked about, they were in Cannes and on a boat, and Diddy accused Cassie of stealing drugs from him, and he threatened her with this freak-off video. And they get on a plane. And how did you get back to New York? The prosecutor says, and she says, on a commercial flight, I traded my seat to get away, but he traded to get next to me. So they go on from that. And they say, well, what did he show you? She says, freak-off videos. He played them for me on one of his laptops. He said he'd release them. Well, how did you feel? She says, trapped. And then they go on. And I think this is interesting. When you landed in New York, what did you do? Well, we went to dinner. And then he wanted to have a freak-off, so we had a freak-off. Why did you do it? To make him not threaten me. She never said that the extortion of saying I'm going to release the tape had anything to do with the freak-off. That had to do with drugs. So again, I don't see that they closed the loop on that. And I want to just give you one more. They talk about when she was dating Alex Fine, her now husband. The question, what, if anything, were you afraid would happen physically if you refused to do a freak-off? She says, I mean, it was always in the back of my mind that I would somehow be hurt by him. And she goes on to say she's worried about the tapes being released. So I'm confused about this because they've never connected the extortion to the freak off, and that seems to be what they have to prove. Joe, am I off base here?
No, you're right. You're right. Look, you're 100% right, because even that testimony that you just heard and read, and you read it verbatim, is not extortion. An extortionate threat is, or an extortionate demand is, I will do this unless you give me this. I will release the tape unless you engage in a freak off. That's not what we heard here. This was having to do with retribution about stealing drugs or not stealing drugs, and that's not extortion. That's revenge, revenge porn. That's a different, maybe another crime. But all the crimes we've discussed so far are state crimes, and they are crimes. Nancy's right about that. They're crimes, and they have done a great job, the prosecution, at making Sean Combs look like a horrific human being, an absolute horrific human being. But we are talking about federal charges here. So yes, they are crimes. They're just not the crimes that he's charged with.
Thank you. Y'all done jumped the gun and tried to get him locked up on the RICO.
The cross-examination, this whole case, Harvey, I've been saying this to you since day one, since reading the indictment.
Y'all probably feel like it's
Diddy. Will boil down to one issue: consent.
We got to pull out the biggest guns for Diddy's ass.
Everything else falls if there is consent. And if you look at some of those recordings of those text messages, the responses from her, they are consensual. And, you know, she could say on the witness stand, well, I wrote those things because I loved him.
Under duress or whatever.
It's hard for a jury to say, look, you know, she's saying, I want more freak offs.
Okay, let me get in here.
What sex trafficking person?
I do actually think Harvey's
what sex trafficked person says they want more sex trafficking? Like I
wrong on the premise here. I think both of you are doing a great job. You and Harvey and our friend Mark here down the bottom, cherry picking certain facts and elements where maybe there were elements of consent present. We all heard the testimony, but there's other facts. Let's talk about the Kid Cudi testimony, shall we? Where Cassie Ventura is saying very clearly that Sean Combs, when she was briefly dating Kid Cudi throughout the on and off of Sean Combs' relationship, that Sean Combs violently and viciously threatened arson, threatened to blow this man's car up if Cassie Ventura left the freak off, left with Kid Cudi, and pursued romantic relationships with her. She then gets afraid, gets in the car with Kid Cudi when he pulls up to pick her up, and then ultimately Sean Combs says, not only am I going to release the tapes if you move forward with this Kid Cudi situation and relationship, I'm also going to hurt him and hurt you. And then we know via the New York Times, I believe, reported that Kid Cudi affirmed to them and their sourcing that a car blew up in his driveway some days after Sean Combs made that threat. So I think this is a clear example where the loop is closed.
Certainly, what they're opening the door for is racketeering, which we're going to get into in a minute. But the Kid Cudi thing is really interesting because she testified while she was dating Kid Cudi. She also was doing freak offs with Diddy, and when asked why, her answer, and I still don't know how to process this, she said, it's my job. It was my job. And I'm wondering what that means.
It could mean several things, Harvey. You're right. It could mean, I was willingness. But it also could mean I didn't feel free to leave. It could mean that I was so in a constant, this is the psychological warfare, I think, that could be argued. I think it is subtly being argued. I think it will be more aggressively be argued by the prosecution later in the case and testimony. But that there was a constant fear of threat of physical violence, which is why I think they spent so much time harping, if you will, on the physical abuse. And also, let's note, ladies and gentlemen, one fact pattern can be true of a multitude of criminal activity. The same facts, the same dragging, kicking in the head and beating that
does lay the case successfully for a state prosecution of domestic violence is also, and I believe it's clause 4 of the federal indictment. They do go into detail about how physical abuse, kicking, punching, dragging, beating is a part of the criminal behavior that Sean Combs coerced in their broader racketeering count. So I think that's their plan.
I wonder,
Harvey,
Mark and
Harvey
yeah,
Levin.
Yes, Nancy.
No offense to you, Levin, or Garagos, or Tacopina, but you just don't get it. All right. You think a woman on this jury is going to believe that Cassie Ventura wanted to be filmed naked and glistening pursuant to Sean Combs' request, just drenched in baby oil, and literally choke on a male sex worker's urine as he took a massive piss into her mouth? She choked. You think that was consensual? Good luck selling that to a jury.
Hey, Mark, I was going to actually raise that because that testimony about Sean Combs and the sex worker both peeing on Cassie to a point where she's choking, whether or not she verbally objected.
In her mouth. You said on
in her mouth. In her mouth.
In her mouth.
In her mouth. And how does the defense overcome that? Because, you know, whether she expressly said to him, don't do that or not, how are they going to overcome something like that? I mean, how will the defense?
I think that's exactly what they're counting on. I think they're counting on the fact that you get the Nancy Grace doesn't like baby oil or doesn't like being urinated on feeling, and that's what they're counting on. I think if you
take pretty a look, general. It's not just Nancy Grace.
I've been around long enough,
Combs
Nancy.
Did this to himself. The state is not painting him out as a villain. He shot his own foot.
When Nancy calms down for a second, you seem to be kind of excited by all this, but hold on. There are some very
typical Garagos comment.
I'm responding to you, Nancy. I'm not going to say that this is what you're into, but there are a lot of people. I'm not into crushing mice with high heels, or not into a lot of things that are fetishes. I don't know what's going on. All I know is this is in somebody's private sexual behavior, and it isn't something that I'm comfortable getting into and piling onto and talking about. And by the way, I will just say,
and you can say that argument to a jury. You notice Tacopina got real quiet.
Why don't you just?
No, I'm not. I just want to interrupt anyone.
Why don't you hold on for 1 second? I would find a lot of things more credible if the first place they went was not to a civil lawyer, and if the second place they went was not to a money lawyer. I would find things more credible. I would think if somebody is feeling this way, that you don't, it's kind of like what I always say when there's a civil auto accident case. Do you go to the hospital first, or do you call 1-800? I'm injured. And I think that those are the kinds of things that most people, if they're looking at this dispassionately,
Joe, stop being quiet. Come on.
Discounting Mark.
How
battered women are treated, and that they don't report
Joe, try to get a word in edgewise, Joe.
I know, Mark. I just don't want to be rude to anyone, but look, here's the deal. They're doing a great job making him out to be a horrific human being. We all knew that was coming, okay? Whether or not this amounts to federal crimes is another story. There's been so much evidence of consent in this case. Her being urinated on, whether she wants to or not, is not a federal crime. It's disgusting. It's not a federal crime. I mean, look, let's go down to the issue of, look, I was a former sex crimes prosecutor, okay? So I am not I am not insensitive to these issues that women have when they're sex crimes victims. I'm not. But I will say this to you. It's fair game and it's fodder that if someone claims to be raped by someone, it's fair game to question that why would they go back to their rapist, to their torturer, their tormentor, and have consensual sexual relations with them again.
It's called Stockholm Syndrome. Am I right, Nancy Grace?
Okay,
It's called Stockholm
okay.
Syndrome.
She said they had a good night. How do you have a good night?
Worker both peeing on Cassie to a point where she's choking.
Sell her book. She got $20 million.
She went to a lawyer years and years and years later. And I am not going to stand by and let the two of you guys pretend that women are not beaten and raped in marriages every day and they don't tell police.
It's fair game.
Okay. So, look, my take is that Cassie is a really believable witness. And this cuts both ways because from my eye, she talked about issues that maybe hurt the prosecution's case. She did, acknowledge love letters that were sent. She did acknowledge things about not only loving freak-offs, but loving them as recently as 2017, well into their relationship. I think this all makes her so much more believable that she's not trying to paint a picture of perfection on the prosecution side. But at the same time, when she says in texts that I would love to have another freak-off, and she said it in 2009, she said it in 2017, and they started dating in 2008, and that's when they started the freak-offs. When she starts talking about loving him, being jealous of Kim Porter, and wanting to be the main girl and doing freak-offs because she was afraid he would do it with another woman. I don't know. I mean,
Harvey,
she was honest, but does that not hurt her?
Harvey,
does it not hurt the prosecutor?
Let me ask you a basic question, Harvey. We know that men can rape their wives, right?
Yes.
We know that. And we know that if a husband were to rape his wife, or in this case, be in a romantic relationship and rape his romantic partner, that is still rape, even if after that particular rape instance occurs, they reconcile and then have a consensual sexual relationship. That does not negate the rape, correct?
It does not negate the rape.
That's not the factual pattern you have here. That's not what you have here. They didn't reconcile.
I'm asking.
She was in another relationship.
What?
She
That's a
did.
different scenario. That's a different.
Cassie did say that at points in times in the situation, I'm calling this situation, I'm calling the thing a thing, that there were apes going on in her situationship with Diddy.
Different factual scenario. She did not reconcile with him. She was on another relationship already. So there was no reconciliation.
No, that's not true, Joe. They did reconcile. She said I was with them on
Well, they were on and off. They were on and off by that point.
So this was constantly reconciling and breaking up. Yes, of course it is, Joe. It's you never been in anything on again, off again. I have. So we reconcile, we break up. Nancy,
I don't know a lot of women. And listen, I find when I was a prosecutor and prosecuting sex crimes cases, I found women jurors to be most harsh critics of women when they were testifying. I really did. And I found that if some woman testified that she was raped and then went back to their rapist and said, I love you, I miss you, can we make love again, and that kind of stuff, it really hurt the credibility of that witness.
That's a very short-sighted woman.
That's fair game.
That's a very short-sighted woman, Joe. No,
another fact, Ebony, is that it wasn't just that she loved or thought she loved him. She met him when she was 19. What do you know? Not that she just had feelings for him, but he held her career, her hopes, her dreams, her whole future. I mean, if I thought that I was going to lose my law license, my home, my children, my family, everything, my livelihood, I don't know what I would do to hold on to that. That's what she was faced with at just age 19 to 21.
Think about what you're saying.
Nancy, that's no different than any other heterosexual power dynamic relationship. You could say that about doctors, you could say it about lawyers, you could say it about anybody. So I don't know. And to Ebony's point, Stockholm syndrome, I'm not aware.
You didn't even
maybe
finish
I
that
haven't
thought.
seen it
You
yet.
just went, I don't
haven't
know, and
seen
trailed
where
off.
I haven't seen where anywhere in the indictment anybody's talking about Stockholm syndrome. What they are talking
No, I
about.
was just citing that, Mark,
Because that's not in the indictment.
So-
Why would that be in the
so-
indictment?
Well, have you read the indictment? It's pretty detailed. It gives details.
Yes, it is. It is
and if
detailed,
there
but
was
you don't have to
Stockholm
advance your
syndrome-
theories
and
in an
by
indictment.
the way, the judge instructs a jury. You don't make a decision until you've heard all the evidence, and we haven't heard. We're on witness 3, and 2 of them were relatively small witnesses. So it's a little premature to be coming to the conclusion.
But there's a theme that I've seen so far, because I have seen prosecutors not closing the loop, and I've seen the defense not closing the loop. And let me give you an example that happened on cross-examination that I'm just fascinated by. That there was one exchange, a text exchange, where Diddy texted Cassie, let's do a freak-off. And all she said was, I'm ovulating. To me, that is saying, no, I will not have sexual intercourse. I don't think you need to use the word no. I think means I am not going to have sex with a sex worker right now. But then he says, well, can we just kiss? And she says, yes. And then they do a freak-off that lasts 10 hours. So I'm thinking, well, what happened during the 10 hours? Did they have intercourse? Because if they did, well, that would kill Diddy, because he's luring her into a situation and then turning it. But they just dropped it, and they never closed the loop. So, number one, I don't understand why they brought that up if it's incomplete. And why are we seeing this 3/4 loop, and neither side is doing the other quarter? That's the way I'm seeing this.
And that's where Nancy's point, though, Harvey, about any woman on that jury that's ever had a menstrual cycle is going to be able to tell you that there is no scenario under God's beautiful sun in which a reasonable woman is wanting and willing to have that type of sexual experience on her menstrual. It's just not fathomable. And this is maybe one of those things you, as men, you guys just kind of can't get. But any woman is going to understand this for the coercive nature that it very much is.
Sadly, windshield chips can turn into windshield cracks.
We are getting live updates. Let me make sure I'm off. Okay, live updates, right? From Diddy all day long, y'all. Diddy all day, Diddy all day. We have been updating y'all on all things updatable to Diddy. Diddy's on his first week out of the gate of the Diddy trial, okay? We've had testimony from the security guard, the escorts, and Cassie's been on the stand for like 20 hours. It's crazy, right? So that's what we're doing. Drop y'all's teacups in the chat. Let me know y'all are in the room with Tanisha Talks Teas. We are keeping it going with the United States versus Diddy. Where are you guys? Like, I'm in the middle of everything. I cannot be pulled either way right now. So I think that right now it's weak for the charges that Diddy's on. I haven't, we're only in the first week, so that's why I'm like where I am standing. I'm not swayed over to any side, prosecution or defense. Of course, if Diddy is found to be credible, or liable for these charges, and Cassie's credible for her testimony, then I hope Diddy gets what he needs, he deserves. And I also don't want an innocent person to go to prison. So I'm in the middle, tea sippers. Where are y'all? Have y'all been swayed to the left, swayed to the right? And where are y'all standing at in the Diddy trial? So far, first we got the gate. I'm just where I am with it, y'all. I mean, I don't think it's all that strong. Like I was hoping, like I was telling y'all first day, like Cassie got to come out hitting hard. She got to come out swinging. And I don't know if that, to lock Diddy up. You know what I'm saying? And I thought that was the motive for, Cassie testifying against Diddy. Like, I thought that's what it was going to be, but mostly it's like, oh, we were lovey-dovey. So we're back up, y'all. Keep your teacups filled up. We got the Cassie Diddy explosive testimony at the Diddy trial.
something that I have found absolutely true. The harshest critics of women are women jurors. It is uncanny to me the kind of harsh light that women look at other women who are on the stand, and I'm going to be so bold and maybe betray my age and my generation. They're harshest on good-looking or attractive
Thank
women.
you.
That's been my
Jealous.
experience over the
Do you
years.
ever get
Wishing
tired
somebody
of
was
being
peeing
told
on
you're a
them.
misogynist? I'm just
Oh
curious
my
because
God!
first you
It's
referred
true.
to
Do you ever
the
get
prosecution as
tired?
a six-pack of
Do
white
you
women. Now
It was like
this,
that
like
here
you know the
today.
mind of a woman.
Do you ever get tired of the prosecutorial screed? And you have never. Is there any point where you just let down and say, maybe we should wait and hear all the evidence? Have you ever said that?
Plenty of times.
Okay, good. Good.
You just weren't
I'll
listening.
accept that. Okay, that could be. You were yelling so loud I didn't hear it.
So, Joe,
Harvey, can I just say one thing? Look, Ebony and Nancy make great points. And this isn't easy. Look, Combs is easy to kill right now. Easy. But it is fair game. And anyone who says it's not fair game, as a defense lawyer, we would have to give in our licenses if we didn't say this. There are issues you have to question about Cassie Ventura's testimony. One, she did not report this to law enforcement or anyone at the time of. She never went to the police. Instead, she went to a lawyer and sought money first for a book and then for a civil lawsuit and got $20 million. Never went to law enforcement. That's one. Two, she has tons of messages talking about consent.
Probably hundreds
That's
of
fair
thousands.
game.
Three, she claims she was raped. Then after the rape, she went back and had consensual sex. And not only said consensual sex, but had a great time with her rapist. Those are things that just the normal person doesn't really jive with. And that's something that is fair game for, and not only is fair game, it's obligatory for any defense attorney defending their client and the United States Constitution to bring up in a courtroom. It's fair game. So we're not attacking the victim. We're bringing out facts, Ebony, that are just real. She didn't report this to the police. There's consensual evidence all over the place. I mean, she got money. She sought money. She tried to sell a manuscript of a book. Come on, it's fair.
I'm gonna let you finish up. Let me make
credibility.
this. Listen, you're making great, zealous arguments on behalf of the defense. Counselor, I will give you that. Let me tell you something. I'm dressed up in this beautiful pink suit, yes, for my beautiful panelist and Harvey here tonight, but I'm actually headed to a fundraising gala for an organization called Safe Horizon. I was a board member for 6 years, Joe.
Beautiful.
It's the largest victim services
I know it's a beautiful organization.
Beautiful organization for victims of domestic violence, child abuse, et cetera, and violence against men, by the way. And what we know, and Nancy knows this being a lifetime prosecutor herself, and y'all know this too, victims often of sexual abuse, rape, and trauma black out. They don't remember for years. The trauma is so severe that they cannot even muster a memory, a recounting to go to the police, as you so nobly suggested, Joe. So it's going to be
not here.
prosecution.
That's not here.
We don't know if it's not here.
Ebony,
We don't know if it's not here.
Hey,
we don't know
Ebony,
that.
I think
to
that
your
they're
point,
right.
Where's the
I think that
blacked out?
Tacopina and Garagos are right.
Yeah,
I think they're right in that. These are obstacles for the state because unless the jury gets explained to, like you are doing right now, unless they have maybe an expert to explain it to the jury, why she kept on, she was afraid to lose her career, maybe even her life. I mean, that video says it all. She was being dragged back into a hotel room. She didn't want to go. She took a beating. So why did she stay? They're right. The state has an issue. That doesn't mean they're going to lose their case. That means they've got to explain to the jury like you just were, Ebony.
Thank you, Nancy. I agree with you. They got to do. They got to earn it. They got to earn it.
When they explain that and we make the point that maybe somebody blacked out, and that's true. There's adrenaline rushes, everything else. They're going to also have another hurdle to explain is when you wake up from this blackout experience, why did you call the money lawyer as opposed to the police? And
it's called the statute of limitations on state cases, Garagos. So you know that. Many of these state cases.
No.
Garagos. That's not true. Years passed and she didn't tell anybody.
We get the point, We get the point, and everybody is kind of agreeing that it's going to be something that the prosecution is going to have to deal with.
Yes.
Nancy, I'm wondering, it's interesting you kind of conceded that point, and it's kind of an obvious one. What about what they're trying to do by saying Cassie was a swinger too? And she acknowledged on the stand during cross-examination, she used to go to swingers clubs with Diddy, that she would watch as he'd have sex with other women. She talked about that they would freely use drugs during the freak-off. It gave them this incredible high. So they are, in a way, painting her with a brush that the prosecution used on Diddy. And even went to a point of saying she was also violent in a bar fight where she wanted to kill somebody. So is that fair game? Is it appropriate to do in a case like this? Because that's what they did.
Well, as I often say to juries, who do you think Sean Combs is hanging out with? Nuns and priests and virgins? No. Okay? Cassie Ventura, like all of us, is not perfect. And she's probably done things she was ashamed of, things she wished she hadn't
Probably.
done. That does not mean
Cassie
she
lives
cannot
10
be raped or
lifetimes
sex
compared to the rest
trafficked.
of our
And
asses.
as to consent, whether she went along with the freak-offs and more because she loved Combs or was afraid, that video shows she was forced back to that hotel room by force. She had knots
So,
on her head. She had to call security
Harvey,
for help. And however you want to paint that, good luck. Have at it.
Harvey, that's Nancy just gave you the if you sleep with dog, you wake up with fleas analogy. I think that most of these jurors, as most of my experiences, are going to keep their minds open unless they're stealth jurors, which is certainly a possibility. But I think jurors are going to wait and they're going to see. And my experience is in sex crime style cases, and I think even cases where I haven't tried it and somebody else has tried it, you've seen the results, and I could tick them all off. Generally, when it is a relationship, jurors have more trouble than if it is not in a relationship, and that is a hurdle. I mean, that's just as a defense lawyer, I've seen that repeatedly.
Nancy,
I think that's true.
Nancy, I know you have an event, and I don't want to hold you hostage. I'd love to
My
keep
son
you
is
there.
in the state
I
championship
know.
soccer playoff. Yes.
Okay,
And
I
as
know.
much as I'd like to keep whipping Garagos and Tacopina's tail with Ebony, I have to go to that. But let me just say, every
gonna go
witness that
watch
takes a
Nancy's
stand is
son.
subjected to a severe cross. And I think the state is going to close the loop, as you refer to it. And I also think that the jury can see through what the defense is doing. As much as Garagos and Tacopina may hate it, that video did emerge. It happened, and it corroborates her. I think that is going to turn the day.
Can we at least, guys, agree on one thing? We wish your son good luck.
Probably
and
not.
we hope he wins.
Oh,
Is that okay? Is that okay?
Thank you. Thanks, Harvey.
I don't fight with that. Good luck to him, Nancy. And bye.
Your son.
You know it. Bye, guys.
Thank you,
Bye,
Nancy.
Bye, Nancy.
Okay, we got.
Oh God, it's a shame, Harvey, that Nancy's no longer with us. I was so tired of getting my ass whooped by Nancy. Thank God. Thank God she's not here anymore.
Well, look,
okay.
I got to ask. I want to ask you guys something, because I think the defense has a problem with this. That there is now an unedited version of that 2016 Intercontinental Hotel tape, and I think it is worse. I mean, I've been hearing rumblings that the defense was saying, "Oh, this is better because it's not sped up and he doesn't look as big." I think it's way worse for the defense. Got to warn you, this video just shows terrible brutality. Cassie looks really calm. It doesn't look like she's in some argument over a cell phone. And he just comes out from nowhere and just brutally attacks her. So to me, this video is worse than what, I mean, look at that. She's putting her shoes on or something, and then he just goes crazy on her.
Horrific. Harvey, here's the problem. It is horrific. It's disgusting. Any guy who could do that to a woman has real issues and is not a man, okay? Putting that aside, that is because of the reaction I just had and you just had and undoubtedly a jury just had. That's why the prosecution has played this. How many times already in 3 days? 6, 7, 8, 9 times already? This tape, one tape? what is this evidence of? This is evidence that he's an abuser, that he's a beater, that commits domestic violence, that he's a bully, that he's a coward. All these horrific things about him. Okay, but does that fill the void where the evidence of sex trafficking should be? Does that fill the void of racketeering evidence? I don't think it does. And if I'm the defense in this case,
they have other facts for that, Joe. I think they got other facts.
No, so okay, great. Other facts, but then why is this being played over and over again? Why? Because it's trying to get the jury to get emotional and get them to want to hate him and convict him because of this tape, which is a domestic violence act, which is a state offense. It's not a federal crime. And this is something that, if I were the defense, I would make sure the jury understood they're being played on here.
No, they're not being played on. It absolutely is domestic violence, which is not at trial on this case. I agree with you, Joe. But you know what it's also evidence of physical abuse, which they are enumerating in the original indictment under count 1 of the racketeering conspiracy count. They absolutely are saying this is a part of his overall mechanism, Joe, of control, of his absolute domain over this woman and some of these other victims. And when the jury sees like Harvey says, he's coming out like a madman. This woman is calmly trying to exit and go about her business. She doesn't even have on shoes, for God's sake. And this is how deranged, how depraved, how angered he is. And that, I think, goes a long way. If he can be this controlling here, why can't they believe he could be so controlling in other parts of their factual case?
So, Ebony, it's nothing more than character assassination. I hate to say it. Joe nailed it, and it is what it is. And I suppose, a prosecutor, you have something like this, you're just going to play it every chance you get. But remember, Harvey and I are old enough to remember Rodney King.
Oh my God, I was just going to mention that. I was literally just going to mention that. Go.
Yeah.
Go.
Talk about Rodney King.
Well, no, I wanted
in the Rodney King case, and it was in Simi Valley, and I was thinking about it this week because same judge presided over the Menendez trials.
Stanley Weisberg.
Yeah. Stanley Weisberg. And he let the prosecutors in that case just repeatedly play the Rodney King tape.
We are becoming the same person. What is going on? I was literally going to, because it diminishes the impact of it. You know, Mark's going to love this because I always tell him, don't do law lessons. But Melvin Belli, an old lawyer, very famous lawyer, he really developed the concept of demonstrative evidence. And what he did was, there was a case where a man lost his leg, I think in a car accident. And the guy sat in court with a pant leg that went down to his shoes. And you never saw the leg. And he got up on the stand and he testified. At one point, Melvin Belli had his clients step down, and in front of the jury, he showed them the stump, and they were horrified. And he put the pants down and never showed it again. And the impact on the jury was huge. And this is one of the things that created demonstrative evidence. I saw this in Rodney King, that they played it so much, and the media played it so much in the year before the trial.
You got used to it.
It didn't have the impact by the time it got to court. And I'm wondering, Ebony, that the prosecutor, by playing it over and over and over, are you diminishing the impact than if you just saw it once or twice?
Here's what's different with Rodney King and that example, very compelling, by the way, Harvey, example of the gentleman with the one leg. Number one, though Sean Combs is not a private citizen that this jury is just seeing for the first time. So much of what the prosecution's assignment here is to deconstruct. They've got to literally deconstruct, for many of these jurors, 30, 40, 50 years of knowing Sean Combs as a hero. You guys culturally got to understand what this man means to some of these jurors who have grown up not only on his music, guys, but on his cultural influence, on his ability to be a black man in America and make good on the American dream, to be the beacon of success and business and wealth and savvy. See, that's a lot of narrative to overcome. So personally, if I was prosecuting this case, I wouldn't have shown the video this many times. I'm conceding that. And also, I do see where they've got a very large narrative to overcome to make who, for many on that jury, not all, but many on that jury of 12, an American hero of sorts into an American monster. And they've got only a few weeks to do it.
So, Brian, everybody wants to know, what was Cassie like on the stand? I mean, was she emotional? Did she look at Diddy? What was it like watching her?
Laser focused as she walked in. She did not look at him. She went straight to the witness stand. But I remember on her second day of testimony, Diddy looked at her when she came in from the lunch break, up and down like this. And then during her testimony, especially on some of that really salacious material, Diddy was glaring at her. She was out of gas by the end of day 2. You could tell she was spent. But on her, towards the end of the government's, I'm sorry, when we go to the cross-examination, she was a different woman. She walked in revitalized. She was very casual. But we started noticing, at least on Thursday, where she would be asked questions by the defense, and it would be, well, I don't know, I can't remember, that was such a long time ago, maybe. She also used upspeak. Well, maybe it was like this. Maybe it was like, so it was like, is she sure of her answer or is she unsure of her answer? The jurors looked at her. They paid very close attention. Particularly, I noticed the female jurors paying very close attention. One of the male jurors, I saw him towards the end of the day and he was yawning. He covered his mouth. Another juror on the back row was kind of in the chair like this because the government, I'm sorry, the defense in their cross, very tedious in getting into the nitty gritty of each one of these experiences and what do you remember?
These are the jurors, okay? We got 8 men, 31, 39, 68, 41, 69, 51, 68, and 67. Okay, remember there are 4 white, 4 black men on the juror stand panel. Okay, so ages, okay, everybody well into like understanding who they are. There's no youngsters up here. There's nobody that, you know, can be swayed by misguided evidence, given anything like that, right? Well, hopefully, but we got a lot of seasoned people around Diddy's age, right? Diddy's in his late 50s. So mid 50s, whatever, however, we got 68, 69, 67. We got 51. Okay. Women, we got a 74-year-old grandmother, great grandmother on the jury for Diddy. Okay. There is a 74-year-old woman, black woman, on the juror panel for Diddy. And then we have like mid-age ranges, 30 to 43. Okay. 30, 42, and 43. And then there's a 74-year-old grandmother. Y'all know y'all wrong for taking her down through here. But nonetheless, those are the ages, races of the panel, juror panel.
And down to, I went to Dwayne Reed to buy supplies. It's a lot. And her husband is on row number 2, along with her brother, watching all of this, listening to this sexual history. I mean, that's his wife. And the stuff that she's talking about would curl your hair.
How was Diddy responding?
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
Diddy has been glaring
but
at
not
her.
for nothing.
We also
That
see
is a
Diddy
hot
look
mess.
back a
That
lot,
is a
and
hot
that might be
mess,
because the clock for the courtroom is right over the gallery where the media is sitting, and they have us kind of blocked off. But I will tell you, he has been gazing at her intently. He's been taking notes. I watched during the cross-examinations, he wrote down a note when they were talking about drugs, and he passed it all the way up to Estevao. And Estevao said, well, would you call us high partners? And she was referring to their drug use. And she said, yeah, I might call it that. That's what we called it. So Diddy's very much involved in sliding questions up to the defense to ask Cassie.
Hey, Mark, Ebony.
We got big balls and I cannot
lie. Right. We are paying some bills over on Tanisha Talks Tees. We're almost wrapping up the day, right? We came in early. We came in at like 7:30 Mountain Standard Time on the Diddy trial today. We missed a lot. So we missed like 2 days. I think we missed one day, maybe just one day. Nonetheless, right? We've been getting our tea, our Diddy tea. Okay, we've been getting our tea, right? Sipping our tea, and it has been a lot, y'all. Where are y'all at? Like, I don't think it's sweet yet. I don't think it's getting sweet to where it's gonna get a little bit of time or no time. The testimony was pretty sour. Like right now, they're squeezing lemons in our tea right now, guys. So brace yourself. If you don't like sour tea like me, preferably, I prefer sweet tea. Then brace yourself, okay? Because the tea they're pouring, is pretty sour. The freak offs and everything else, it gets nasty, it gets disgustingly grueling, and just the most disheartening thing. And you know what? Why hasn't where's Cassie's family? So in any of this, I have never heard a mother, grandmother, father, brother, uncle, cousin, auntie, uncle, I don't know, anybody pop up on the scene for Cassie. Do this, moment. You would think that somebody from her family would be in attendance for her, pregnant, and testifying to this type of things going on. So does anybody have any type of tea on if Cassie's family has attended court? Okay, we're up with TMZ's United States versus Diddy.
About Discovery, including important warnings.
And Joe, I'm so interested to hear what your reaction to this, and you may just think my theory here is wacky. But Cassie comes in very, very pregnant. And it is hard to juxtapose what you're seeing on the stand with this swinger who is engaged in these freak-offs. And that benefit, at least in my head, it benefits prosecutors. But then yesterday, the prosecution shows the jury screen grabs of the various freak-offs where Cassie is there in the middle of sexual acts, looking very, very different. And it just seems to me that maybe you gained a little, but you lost a lot, because now the jury doesn't have to imagine it and try to juxtapose what they're seeing on the stand, but they're seeing it. And I just was shocked that prosecutors, what did they gain by it? It just seems to me that they created a bridge for the jury to say, wow, she did it. I mean, I heard the testimony, she was into it, and now I see it. I don't get it.
Well, look, I mean, they had these photographs. They had the proof that these things happened, right? So I think they felt compelled to present them. It's a tough call, Harvey. You may be right, but I think the fact that she comes in there pregnant, looking angelic, and all that stuff is inconsistent with the story she's going to eventually tell, and the story she did in fact tell, right? So I think that veneer gets removed pretty quickly. I mean, the jury is going to see her pregnant and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, they're evaluating the facts of a case and the evidence in a case, and the fact that she's pregnant is not going to affect this verdict in any way, shape, or form. So
I thought she was going to pop. She was fanning herself at the end of the day.
If she pops, then it'll affect the verdict.
Oh, that's just classic third trimester stuff, Brian. Don't even worry about it. I just had it myself. But no, here's the thing. I actually think you make a very compelling point, Harvey. Now, do I think it's going to totally sway the outcome of the case? No, I agree with Joe. I don't think so. But I do think this is classic Madonna whore complex, right? I think that's a very real complex. And I agree with both Garagos and Joe that women kind of zero in on that Madonna whore dichotomy, if you will, even stronger than men. We like to see our mothers very Madonna-ish, very purist, very virginal, if you will. And we like to see our whores nice and plain where we can see them and we know what they're about. So I think that the optic of Cassie in that freak-off capacity, probably drugged out of her mind, who knows what else, was unbecoming, was incongruent with the very virginal, stunning aspect of the optical display of Cassie 8 months pregnant, glowing and beautiful. So I don't know really what was gained by it at all.
Mark,
you know what I really miss is Nancy Grace having heard that Madonna whore example, because that would have been the price of watching the 45 minutes.
No
Yes,
kidding.
Exactly.
So
watching
look,
the head explode.
Mark, you represent the Menendez brothers. These guys in the first trial won over half the jury. And I believe optics mattered in that case. Leslie Abramson put them in pastel sweaters every day. And it was hard to look at them and juxtapose two guys with a shotgun blowing off their parents' heads. Just hard to do. So optics matter. So that's why I'm raising this. Why did they want to show the jury something that says, oh, okay, I can forget the fact that she's pregnant because now I see it?
You know, I'm going to go off topic because you reminded me of something. I got a call this morning that a former client of mine, Chris Brown, was arrested in the UK.
Right.
And then you asked just now about sweaters, and the one.
Oh my God, the Chris Brown baby blue sweater.
The baby blue sweater on Larry King, and I'll never forget walking into the green room and saying, who thought this was a good idea to dress him like Urkel? And I've never gotten over that, and I wish Chris well for whatever he's in custody for, and hope he's out.
Okay, so cross-examination will go on, the beginning of the case. This is week one. There is a long ways to go. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We will all be here next week, and just keep your eye on the ball here if you want to follow this case, because every hour something happens. See you next week. I think next week we are going to start hearing testimony about Sean Diddy Combs, the godfather of a criminal organization, sort of like the mafia, because that's what he's being charged with, running a criminal organization. And we are going to hear about all sorts of things, from blowing up Kid Cudi's car, allegedly, or at least ordering people to kidnapping, to hanging people over balconies. It should really be a gripping week, and we will be right back here next week to give you the lowdown.
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired, and remember, always stay dipping.